Welcome to your Branch Out podcast, where we explore communication, markets, digital behavior, and business signals shaping Southeast Asia.
And, if you are uh, managing a budget or directing a regional team right now, there is a very specific, honestly, very expensive trap just waiting for you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we spend massive amounts of time and capital analyzing the giant hubs of Southeast Asia, right? We study the mega cities, we map out the dominant tech corridors, and then we take those insights into the boardroom and just sort of assume the smaller neighboring markets are, well, miniature versions of those hubs.
Yeah, we treat them as if they're operating on the exact same timeline, just delayed by maybe 3 to 5 years.
Exactly.
But that assumption of a regional monolith is probably the single biggest liability for a communication strategy today. Because when you look at a map, it's incredibly easy to group geographically close countries together. You assume the rules of digital gravity apply equally across those borders.
Right, but they don't.
No, they don't at all. When we analyze how digital systems and human trust actually evolve in smaller or emerging markets, that whole assumption completely shatters.
Yeah.
You cannot simply, adjust your expectations for a smaller population and run the exact same playbook.
So let's focus this directly on the early 2025 digital data we have for Cambodia and Laos, because geographically they sit right side by side.
Right.
And if you're just glancing at a high-level executive summary, they appear to be at seemingly identical stages of early digital maturity.
Right, on paper.
Exactly, on paper. But the reality on the ground is that they are moving on completely divergent trajectories. The local context in these two markets entirely rewrites the rules of digital trust.
Yeah, treating them as a uniform target isn't just inefficient. It can actively alienate your target audience. And smaller markets actually offers a much clearer lens into human behavior because they lack the sheer overwhelming volume of, say, a Jakarta or a Manila to mask inefficiencies.
Right, the underlying architecture of trust becomes highly visible.
Exactly. Right now, the data coming out of Cambodia and Laos is sending a massive signal about how local culture metabolizes digital tools.
Well, I want to look at the trap of these markets looking similar on paper because the statistical similarities really are striking.
Yeah.
Like, look at the demographics. In both countries, half the population isn't even old enough to rent a car yet. Cambodia's median age is 26.2 years old.
And Laos is right there alongside them at 24.9.
Super young. And regarding internet access, they are practically identical. Roughly 6 out of every 10 people are online in both places.
Right.
Cambodia is sitting at 60.7% penetration, which is about 10.8 million users. And Laos is actually slightly higher in terms of penetration at 63.6%.
Which is roughly 4.97 million users.
Right.
And we have to view those specific demographics through a much wider regional lens, to understand the pressure these societies are under. Because over the last 2 decades, World Bank data shows that 131 million jobs have been created across East Asia and the Pacific.
Which is a massive generational economic shift.
Absolutely. These economies are transitioning away from traditional farming and moving rapidly towards services and manufacturing.
Okay.
So both Cambodia and Laos are navigating the exact same macroeconomic current with the exact same young, newly connected demographic.
Right. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of a startup founder or a regional brand manager. You're sitting in a boardroom looking at the spreadsheet. You see 2 young neighboring countries going through the same agrarian to service transition. You see Laos actually has a marginally higher internet penetration rate.
Yeah.
The temptation, and I mean, I've seen this happen countless times, is to just hit copy paste on your digital marketing playbook. If your campaign works in Phnom Penh, the logic says you should just translate it and run it in Vientiane.
Right.
Why doesn't that work?
It fails because a spreadsheet treats internet penetration as a measure of behavior, when in reality it merely measures access. Knowing that someone has an internet connection tells you absolutely nothing about what they use that connection to accomplish.
Right.
The core defining difference between these two markets comes down to their underlying environmental momentum.
Meaning what, exactly?
Well, Cambodia is a market defined by acceleration. It's characterized by rapid urban development. Currently, about 26.3% of the population is urban, and they're experiencing this massive, growing exposure to broader regional trends.
Okay.
Laos, conversely, is a market of constraint. It's experiencing much slower infrastructure expansion, and the population remains 60.8% rural.
Right. So if we have rapid urbanization on one side
Yeah.
and a largely rural, slower infrastructure environment on the other, I imagine the way people actually use their phones looks wildly different,
Totally.
despite having the exact same internet penetration rates.
Yeah, and the data pushes that distinction even further when we look at a critical secondary signal, which is cellular mobile connections. Right. This is where the whole identical twin illusion breaks down.
Hmm.
In Cambodia, there are 25.3 million active cellular mobile connections.
Wow.
Yeah, that is equivalent to 143% of the total population.
Wait, let me stop you there, because 143% is a huge number. That means the average person doesn't just have a phone.
Right.
They have multiple SIM cards. They might have a device for work, a device for personal use, maybe a dedicated line just for data or gaming.
They're constantly tethered. Now contrast that density with Laos, where mobile connections sit at 86.7% of the population.
Oh, a massive difference.
This is the crucial distinction for any operator in the region. Yes, both populations have internet access, but the sheer intensity of the digital immersion is vastly different.
Right.
A society operating at 143% mobile connection density is just swimming in a constant, unbroken stream of digital signals. It fundamentally changes their attention span. A society at 86% is connected, but the digital layer hasn't completely overwhelmed the physical one. The phone is a tool, not the entire environment.
Right. So if I'm a founder, this tells me my entire communication strategy has to shift. In Cambodia, because you have this hyperdense 143% connection rate, we have to look at what they're actually doing with all that screen time.
Yeah.
When you look at the 2025 footprint, what Cambodians are doing on those devices is almost entirely social media.
The consolidation of attention is staggering, really. We're looking at a society that has entirely migrated its public discourse, its commerce, and its entertainment to centralized platforms.
Yeah, the numbers back that up completely. There are 12.9 million social media user identities in Cambodia. That equates to 72.4% of the total population.
Yeah.
But the really wild statistic is when you look at adults aged 18 and older, social media penetration hits 111.6%.
Which is incredible.
Yeah, Facebook essentially captures the entire connected population. And then you have TikTok, which acts as this exclusive, omnipresent discovery layer with 10.7 million adult users.
It's a completely centralized ecosystem. And that centralization forces a very specific behavioral adaptation. When everyone is in the same digital space, the noise level is deafening.
It makes me think of like a digital megacity billboard, but it's more than just being visible, right? Like if you drive past a physical restaurant and the neon open sign is flickering and the parking lot is completely empty.
You don't eat there.
Right. You assume the food is bad or they went out of business. In Cambodia's digital space, an inactive Facebook page is an empty parking lot. Frequency is the open sign.
Exactly. The billboard analogy gets the surface, but the underlying mechanism here is what we call trust through visibility.
Okay.
When a consumer in Cambodia evaluates a brand, the primary instinctive question they ask is this active?
Not necessarily, is this the highest quality?
Right. Or, do my real-world friends know the owner? They're asking if the entity has enough momentum to be legitimate.
Why does that shift happen, though? Like, why does frequency suddenly equal trust?
Because in a market of rapid acceleration and urbanization, traditional physical community ties fracture.
Ah, right.
People move to the city. They leave their village networks. Things are moving too fast to rely on your neighbor to recommend a plumber or a coffee shop. So what replaces the old village word of mouth? Digital repetition.
Wow.
Yeah, if a consumer sees your product showcase on TikTok on Tuesday, and then they see a promotion on Facebook on Wednesday, and they see that you posted an update an hour ago, that frequency signals that you're a functioning, heavily trafficked, trustworthy business.
So if I'm reading that right, my sleek, minimalist corporate website is essentially useless in Cambodia.
Pretty much.
If I'm not posting to TikTok or Facebook 5 times a week, consumers won't just think my brand is boring. They'll literally think I am out of business.
Exactly. Underinvesting in visibility here isn't just a marketing failure. It's fatal to your credibility.
Right.
You will vanish from the consumer's reality. The buying behavior in a highly urbanized, digitally dense market follows a strict sequence. First, discovery, usually through algorithmic pushing on TikTok. Second, validation, which they do by checking your Facebook to see if you are actively and recently posting. Third, engagement. And only after all that do they purchase.
Okay, so your content strategy has to be engineered for the environment. You need constant product showcases, simple and clear promotions, and high volume.
You have to feed the algorithm just to maintain your baseline legitimacy.
Wow. But let's cross the border then. If Cambodia is all about shouting from the digital rooftops to prove you exist, what happens when a regional manager tries that exact same loud, high-frequency strategy in Vientiane?
Well, this is where the copy-paste spreadsheet strategy creates active damage. The data from Laos shows a radically different ecosystem. We're looking at 4.25 million social media users, which is about 54.3% of the population.
Okay.
Facebook remains the primary platform, capturing those users. But once you look past Facebook, the platform density simply plummets.
It really does. Like, Instagram has only 528,000 users in Laos. LinkedIn is practically a ghost town with just 180,000 users.
Exactly.
So you don't have that secondary layer of massive algorithmic discovery.
No, you don't. Instead, the data shows a heavy reliance on closed communication channels. Messenger reaches 2.8 million users, and there is deep reliance on local messaging apps like WhatsApp.
Which points to a low-density digital ecosystem.
Right. The platforms are being used for direct, one-to-one or one-to-few communication, not public broadcast discovery. Remember the constraint we discussed. Laos is 60% rural. The infrastructure is expanding, but slowly.
So because the infrastructure is slower to reach these rural areas, the physical communities haven't fractured the way they do in a hyper-urban center like Phnom Penh.
Right.
The physical village square hasn't been broken, it's just been digitized.
Exactly the right way to frame it. The digital ecosystem in Laos doesn't replace the physical world. It mirrors it.
Right.
Therefore, the trust mechanism is entirely relational. It is based on proximity.
Okay.
When a consumer in Laos evaluates a business, the core question is not, is this visible?
Right.
Or are they posting 5 times a day?
Right.
The question is, do I know this person? Or does someone in my trusted network know them?
I can hear a business operator listening to this, looking at their regional digital ad spend and wondering if digital marketing is just useless in Laos.
Right.
Like if it's all about who you know and your cousin just sends you a WhatsApp message about a new product, why even bother having a Facebook page?
Well, digital isn't useless there, but it plays a strictly supporting role. It is not the tip of the spear.
Okay.
This is a crucial pivot for SMEs and founders to grasp. Let's say you open a business in Vientiane. If you overinvest purely in flashy digital ads, bombarding the market with high-frequency content, but you have no offline community roots,
You fail.
you will fail.
Yeah.
Trying to replace a solid offline reputation with a loud digital presence in Laos won't make you look cutting edge.
What does it make you look like?
It'll make you look suspicious, out of touch, and disconnected from the real fabric of the community.
Because buying behavior in Laos is inherently an offline-first decision.
Exactly. The consumer relies on personal networks. They use digital channels, hence the massive reliance on Messenger and WhatsApp, to confirm things through direct private contact. They need in-person reassurance, or at least a private endorsement from a trusted connection before they are willing to transact.
So if I'm designing a regional campaign, my content for Laos looks completely different. I am not posting rapid-fire product shots like I would in Cambodia.
Totally not.
I'm focusing on local community references. I'm highlighting personal endorsements from recognized local figures. I'm trying to prove that I am a part of the physical fabric of the market.
Right.
Digital is just there to validate what is already true in the real world.
That's beautifully put. In an acceleration market like Cambodia, digital visibility creates the reality. In a constraint market like Laos, digital merely reflects the offline reality.
So if you're managing a budget across both these borders right now, your biggest liability is looking at a macroeconomic report and treating these markets as identical twins.
Absolutely.
The World Bank notes that over the next decade, 320 million people will reach working age across East Asia and the Pacific.
Right.
That demographic dividend is the grand prize for any regional business. But you cannot capture that 320 million person block with a uniform playbook.
You simply can't. If you apply a blanket strategy, you will inevitably violate the local rules of trust in one of your target markets. If you fail to scale your digital presence in Cambodia, you lose the momentum game and disappear. But if you try to forcefully scale a pure digital presence in Laos without doing the grueling offline groundwork in the community,
You alienate your buyers.
exactly, you alienate them entirely.
So translating this to resource allocation for you, the listener, your communication strategy has to flex based on the market's specific trajectory, not just its current internet penetration rate. In an acceleration market like Cambodia, you budget heavily for content volume. You invest in centralized platform dominance on Facebook and TikTok. You pay to keep that open sign flickering constantly.
But when you turn your attention to Laos, that same marketing budget needs to be aggressively reallocated.
Right.
You budget for community building. You spend on physical events or hyper-local sponsorships. You use your digital spend merely to validate those real-world relationships. You empower your sales teams to use Messenger and direct contact to build one-on-one relational trust, rather than relying on algorithmic discovery.
It fundamentally comes down to understanding the psychological difference between a population that is rapidly urbanizing and therefore leaning heavily into digital heuristics to figure out who to trust, versus a population that remains highly rural and uses digital tools primarily to maintain their tight-knit physical communities.
And as these markets continue to mature, these divergent behaviors aren't going to suddenly align. They will become more entrenched.
Right.
Oh, definitely. The operators who recognize these signals today, the ones who decode the nuanced difference between a market of acceleration and a market of constraint, are the ones who will establish unshakable foundations across the region.
So the next time you look at a regional spreadsheet, remember that an internet connection is just a cable. What actually dictates your business outcome is the culture pulsing through that cable.
Exactly.
And before we wrap, consider this. As AI begins to automate content creation, the digital momentum of Cambodia is going to get exponentially louder.
Oh, absolutely.
If every brand can flood the zone with 100 TikToks a day at zero cost, will the Cambodian market eventually become so overwhelmed with noise that it reverts back to the relational offline trust model we currently see in Laos?
It's definitely something to watch closely as these platforms evolve.
This market is evolving fast, but the real opportunity belongs to those who understand how local trust is built before they try to scale visibility. That closes our discussion for today. Thank you for listening to Branch Out by Y Consulting, where we examine the signals shaping business across Southeast Asia. Keep watching the signals. We'll speak with you again in the next episode.